Welcome students, I'm Anju Gupta and today I'm going to talk about writing effective paragraphs. What is a paragraph actually? You all have looked at paragraphs, written paragraphs, been scolded about not paragraphing well. So let's talk about what is a paragraph. As you know, most pieces of writing require more than one paragraph. And it is actually a very essential skill for success in any form of writing, whether you're writing a letter, a report, or any piece of academic writing, an assignment that you're giving to your teacher. And in longer pieces of writing, paragraphs generally introduce new ideas to develop the central theme. And this division into paragraphs, you might ask, why is it required? One, because it helps develop the central theme, and also as a writer, you will notice it breaks boredom. It's a physical break on the page and that prevents boredom. Now, for any paragraph, you need a topic sentence. And a paragraph is actually unified by this central controlling idea or theme, which is called the topic of a paragraph. This can be expressed at any place in the paragraph. It is usually one sentence, and this is called the topic sentence. It can be a statement, it can be a question, it can be a proverb, it can be many things. It can be written at the beginning of the paragraph, at the end, or even in the middle. And sometimes there's no topic sentence at all. It is implied within the paragraph. Now let's look at this paragraph, which is from Animal Behavior and Infant Science, Time Life books. And I'll read part of it. So the vast majority of people, wherever they live and whatever their occupation, come in contact with animals in one way or the other. And they have to deal with them. So what does the hunter do? He has to know the ways of his quarry. The farmer is aware of the habits of his farmyard animals and the creatures that damage his crops. The fisherman must know when and where to find the fish and how to capture them. And the modern city dweller also needs animals. And then there is, a little bit more, but we end with, and there is a growing awareness of the fact that sharing our world with our fellow creatures is like traveling together. We enjoy being surrounded by other beings who, like ourselves, are deeply absorbed in the adventure of living. There is a growing sense of marvel and also of affinity. So, in other words, this paragraph is telling us that we are all fellow creatures living on this earth and enjoying the earth. So, what is the topic sentence? The vast majority of people, wherever they live and whatever their occupation, come in contact with animals in one way or another and have to deal with them. Now, how was this topic sentence developed? We talk about the hunter and the quarry. We talk of the farmer and the farmyard animals. We talk of the fisherman trying to outwit the fish. And we talk about the city dweller. And the summing up is, this is done by stating that there is a common bond between humans and other creatures. We all live on this planet Earth. Now, what are the two principal patterns of structuring in a paragraph? Because we have to look at how we've given examples of how a topic sentence is there and how it is developed. Now, how do we sort of bind the paragraph together? One is by linking devices. So we link sentences together. So that is known as cohesion. Then we have to also link ideas. So this is known as coherence. So in a coherent paragraph, a writer takes the reader logically and smoothly from one idea to the next and uses cohesive devices to do so. So, for example, let's read this one. So, man has been able to spread across the earth so widely for four main reasons. First, he's a terrestrial animal and not restricted to forest. Secondly, he can cross any natural barriers. So deserts, ocean, mountains can be crossed. Moreover, he can live off a wide variety of food. Most important of all, he has developed culture. To a large extent, he shares some of these advantages with the monkeys. They too can move over unforested land. Let's go back. So what you see is firstly, secondly, moreover, most important of all, to a large extent, they too. So these are cohesive devices. All right? These are how the sentences are linked with each other. If you remove the cohesive devices, you will not be able to understand the sentences as clearly. So, we've given you a list of cohesive devices to express result. So, we have therefore, as a result, consequently, hence. To give examples, we have for example, for instance, as an illustration. To express comparison, we have likewise, similarly. To express contrast, we have nevertheless, on the other hand, however. To express addition, we have moreover, furthermore, also, besides, in addition. To indicate time, we have now, later, meanwhile, since, before that time, and so on. And to express sequence, you've already come across those, firstly, secondly, third, then, next, finally. So these cohesive devices link sentences, but they are also effective for transition from one paragraph to another. Because remember, we write in paragraphs, but the whole that we, if we write a whole article or given an assignment, there are several paragraphs within the assignment, and so each paragraph has to relate to the paragraph before it and the paragraph after it. So let's talk a little bit about types of paragraphs. So paragraphs can be developed in a number of ways depending on the purpose of the writer, the topic that you're writing, the kind of reader that you're addressing. And we can talk of these of paragraph developments in two broad categories. One, those which stay strictly within the scope of the topic. So where we use illustration, descriptions, definition, cause and effect. Then we have techniques which involve a second topic, that is comparison and contrast. So now let's look at the methods of development. There is no one rule about the kind of development to be adopted. Some topics lend themselves more readily to certain kinds of development. For instance, if you're describing a person or a landscape, obviously it will be descriptive. But most pieces of writing have more than one technique in composing a paragraph. Let's go on to illustration. So illustrations are expressed in different ways through examples. We've already, actually the first paragraph was about illustration. So it's examples, it's about pictures, figures, tables. And this helps the reader to understand a difficult and abstract generalization in the topic sentence. So the examples also add to the reader's interest. So you often introduce examples by, for example, for instance, an example, etc. And when we give examples to support our topic sentence, we have to keep in mind there should be enough examples to support your point. As you could see in the first example, it was about the hunter, it was about the farmer, it was about the fisherman, it was about the person in the city. So there were 4 examples. And they should be logically related to your main idea. They should be developed with interesting details. And it should represent a reasonable cross-section of the group you're dealing with. All right? Then let's go on to descriptions. Now, often descriptions are actually part of a letter. Maybe you're writing a personal letter and to your friend or to your cousin or a sibling. So you've been to a place, so you'll describe the people, then you'll talk about yourself, then you'll give examples of the food that you ate. So you'll never really write descriptions which are complete in themselves. They're included in other pieces of writing, for example, personal letters, narratives, reports, travelogues. There could be descriptions about people, places, objects, habits, conditions, scenes of accidents, for instance. Descriptions are concerned with detail. So the more expansive your vocabulary is and more precise that it is, the better your descriptive writing will be. So when you're talking about descriptive writing, you need place, position, direction, you need measurements like weight, size, volume, distance, you need shapes, patterns, you need colors of clothes that somebody is wearing, the texture of the leaves, you need to talk about materials, substances, and so on. Normally, when you write a description, you begin with the general appearance. You then select the physical details that will support the description of general appearance. Then you describe each object by giving characteristics such as size, color, design, weight, material. Sometimes when you're talking about scenes and landscapes, you need to use things like near to far, high to low, left to right, and so on. Okay? Then we come to another kind of paragraph writing, which is cause and effect. And this is quite a complex task. Because, for example, and I've given this example to you, that supposing a daughter is rebelling against her father and leaving home. So that may have an apparent cause. Okay, the father scolded her and that's the apparent cause. But there may be a chain of causes going back to the past. You know, the relationship between the father and daughter, maybe, things that have happened in the past. So there are likely to be many causes, not just one. Okay? So when developing a topic which is supported by reasons or causes, please remember, you have to make clear whether you're dealing with the immediate cause or an earlier cause, a direct cause or an indirect cause. You have to consider multiple causes. You have to show the links in the sequence of causes. You have to write about all the causes or reasons with details. Okay? For example, now we've taken this from a geography book. So hills and mountains are slowly worn away over thousands of years by the process of erosion. So erosion takes place everywhere on earth. There's several forces of erosion, glaciers, then there's frost which causes small cracks on the rock sides, strong winds which wear away exposed rocks in deserts. So by far the greatest cause of erosion is the action of water on rocks. So what does water do? Water carries chemicals dissolved in it that soften rocks. This softening is the first stage of erosion, which is called weathering. Then rainfall on the hills run into streams and rivers, and these carry the weathered rocks away. And then millions of years in the future, your favorite hill will have been worn completely by erosion. So the topic sentence is, hills and mountains are slowly worn away over thousands of years by the process of erosion. Causes are glaciers, frost, strong winds, water. And another big cause is process of erosion by water. The summing up is, in 1,000,000 years, even your favorite hill will be worn away by erosion. So what you need to do is look at how these paragraphs are written and then write in the same manner. Then let's talk about effects. Effects or consequences can be handled in much the same way as reasons or causes. If several consequences are listed, you must be careful to distinguish between the major and the minor ones. So we talk about an earthquake, for example. So an earthquake strikes without warning. When it does, its power is immense. What kind of damage it causes? The damage it causes is as great as if it struck a primitive village. Gas mains burst, explosions are caused, fires are started, underground railways are wrecked, whole buildings collapse. So you just go on seeing what the effects are. Okay, if it strikes in mountain regions, avalanches roar down into the valleys. So you are seeing what are the consequences of an earthquake. And then we give another example. Without sunlight, there could be no form of life as we know it, and all human basic needs can be ultimately traced back to the sun. So in the first place, by its light and warmth, the sun directly creates the necessary conditions for human survival. Secondly, the sun indirectly provides people with water, for the heat of the sun causes damp air over the seas to rise, form clouds, which cool at high altitudes and fall as rain. So one result of rainfall is formation of lakes and rivers, from which people can take their water supply and which can in turn be used for hydroelectric power. And at the same time, rain together with sunlight enables plants to grow and which provide food for humans and animals. And I have given you a task. So you can pause here and complete this task. Okay? So I am not going to do this, you are going to do this. All right? So I have given you some of the answers in the task. The main cause is of course the sun. Now you complete this. Let's go on to comparison and contrast. So generally two items are compared and contrasted, and that's for three basic purposes. That is to point out distinctions in order to give information about two things, to clarify the unfamiliar by comparing it with the familiar, to show the superiority of one thing over the other. For example, if you're comparing two cars, and there are two ways of arranging this. So you give all the points of one and you contrast it with the points of the other. Okay, you compare and contrast it with the other. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to take each point in turn and to compare the two things in respect of each point, like this. Okay, so I think this is pretty clear how you're supposed to do it. There are two ways of doing it. Now we come to another big topic, which is chronological sequence. And that can be a narrative, it can be a process, it can be a biographical piece as well. And in complex pieces of writing, time has to be manipulated. This is chronological sequence, so it is all to do with time. So a writer can move backwards and forwards through time. And in the passage that we have given, which is a narrative passage, the writers use a complex time movement. And why is that? And we will be reading that, but I just want to give you a little bit of a hint that the writer wants to highlight the happy and comfortable life of the protagonist and his family in the past and the unfortunate circumstances they have fallen into now. So this is the example. It was the same story everywhere. He returned home in the evening. His heart sank as he turned into the street behind the market. His wife would be waiting, standing at the door with the children behind her, looking down the street. They had anxious, eager faces. They were hoping that he would come back with some magic fulfillment, and how he remembered the futile way in which he searched for a job and the finality with which people dismissed him. And he wished that his wife and children had less trust in him. His wife looked at his face, understood and turned away without uttering a word, and the children also went in silently. And so Rama Rao would improve matters with forced heartiness, and he'd say, well, how are we today? And he would receive fumbling responses from his wife, and it rent his heart to see them in this condition. So the story begins at a particular time. He returned home in the evening. Then it flashes in the past. His wife would be invariably standing at the door, waiting for this magic fulfillment. And in fact, here we see a complex use of different times. Rama Rao uses his knowledge of the past to anticipate the coming scene. So we see this complex interplay of the past and the present. And he remembers again now in the past the futile way in which he searched for a job. And he hoped that his wife had less trust in him. And then the present time, and his wife looked at his face and she saw what had happened, and she would silently go inside. So when you do this chronological sequencing, you have to be very, very clear about time sequences. And so time indicators are just then, in those days, at 6 o'clock, 6 years ago. Time sequences, so earlier time, until then, by then, up to that time, prior to. Then same time, during this period, he fell ill, while working at, in the meantime, and so on. Later time, after this, subsequently, afterwards, after a while, in the long run, and so on. Then we come to the next process, the next part of chronological sequencing, which is known as process writing. So this is also organized chronologically, but it follows a natural time order, and that's strictly followed. So there is no in-between play of time as you did in the narrative, as you do in a story or a novel. Here you start at the beginning of the process and you continue step by step to the end. And for this you need to thoroughly understand the process that you're describing. Try it out yourself. Inform your readers of the special tools or materials which you require. So you could mention this in terms of if it's a recipe, ingredients or tools required, materials required. And you have to alert your readers if there is precise timing or measurement. You have to also warn your readers if there is any dangerous step or any dangerous material. Give illustrations, because illustrations will help you reduce the number of words. So you have to just actually focus on the steps of the instructions rather than description of the apparatus. Use linking words which will make clear the sequence in which the events or the stages in the process occur. So let me describe a process, black tea. So the basic steps in making black tea from raw leaf are withering, rolling, fermenting and frying. First, the leaves are transported from the plantation to the factory as rapidly as possible. Then these leaves are spread on racks to wither. So this removes the moisture, the leaves become soft and pliable, and then they are rolled to break the cells and release the juices which are essential for the fermenting process. Then the leaves are spread out and kept under high humidity to promote fermentation and develop the rich flavor of black tea. Then the leaves are dried, or as they call it, fried, until the moisture is removed. So these are some of the ways in which paragraphs can be created. There are more ways as well, but I thought let me just begin and tell you that at least master these, the most prominent of the ways of mastering the art of paragraph writing. So thank you students. I hope you learned something and enjoyed yourself. Okay.